What's going on, everybody? Welcome
All right.
to fourth
Welcome in.
live. Go ahead. Hit us, Hammer.
Yeah, just saying welcome in. It's Wednesday night, 7:30 Eastern, as usual. So we're here, as Alex, aka Bossman, said, for the fourth edition of Biscuits and SEC Live. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We've got a great show ahead. We're going to talk a little bit about what we saw in Week 8, which absolutely delivered yet again. We're going to talk a little bit about Week 9, of course, the games ahead, and then just some storylines, some bigger picture stuff we're seeing, right? I'm sure we'll touch on some officiating, QBs, Arch Manning, Quinn Ewers, Oklahoma making some coaching changes, maybe going to some hot seat stuff. So big show ahead. Thanks again for tuning in. If it's your first time, we are Biscuits and SEC, just a college football blog about the SEC. You can read our stuff. We put out several blogs a week on our website. We also do a bi-weekly newsletter during the season on Monday and Friday morning. So it's totally free to sign up. You can see the link below if that's of interest to you. And if we just keep it fun, keep it light, and keep everybody up to date on the latest SEC and college football news. I think we can get into it. So without further ado,
dive right in.
Yeah, boss man, let's get into it. So first up, we're just going to dive into what we saw in Week 8. So what jumps out at you? Where do you want to go first?
Maybe we start in Knoxville with Alabama, Tennessee. Interesting game. It's crazy to think about Alabama just a couple weeks ago beating Georgia in that marathon, insane shootout game that we saw. And now looking at the Alabama team that we're seeing now, it seems like night and day difference. Jalen Milroe seems like Jekyll and Hyde. Seems like a completely different quarterback at this point than the one that we saw against Georgia and the one that we saw early in the season. So that Alabama has a lot to figure out. They got a lot to work on. And at this point, they're on the ropes. You know, last week we talked a lot about teams that were on the ropes in these games that were going to put a team on the ropes for the college football playoff if they weren't able to win. That was going to be Tennessee if they lost. It was Alabama if they lost, and the Tide got the short end of the stick. So Alabama's their playoff hopes are still in front of them, but it's not going to be easy. I mean, we can look at their schedule real quick. So you got Mizzou coming up. You still got LSU out there. You got Oklahoma, and you got Auburn left. And we all know Auburn's not good this year, but that doesn't matter. Every single year, that's a tough game, no matter where they are. So does Alabama make the playoffs? What were your kind of takeaways from that game?
Yeah, I think obviously with it being a 12-team playoff, that Alabama is still alive, even with 2 losses. I think a 10-2 Alabama team, you're really going to have a hard time leaving them out. I mean, we just saw last year they got the 4th spot over an undefeated FSU team. So I think we know, deservedly so in most regards, but I think we know what a committee will think of them. In terms of the actual game, I totally agree with you. Alabama just seems pretty lost. I mean, the first thing that jumped out to me was Milroe, like you mentioned. He, throwing the football, I think we've seen enough of him at this point to know he's going to be pretty inconsistent. He's going to have games where he is on and he's hitting deep shots, and then he's going to have games where he's just not. I think we've seen enough to know that, his ability to throw the ball is just, he's never going to be a pocket passer delivering the ball down the field with extreme accuracy. He can still be effective, but it's not going to be super consistent. I was just surprised with how Tennessee was able to limit him on the ground. I mean, he had, I think he finished, I know, in college football, they count the sacks against you, but he totaled 11 yards on 14 carries. He was not able to get outside the pocket and really be effective at all. And I think that's credit to Tennessee, right? They basically said, hey, your running backs have not been very effective running the football. thus far, or in the last few games in SEC play. And we are not going to let Milroe beat us with his legs. We're going to make him beat us with his arm. And he could not do it. I mean, they shut Tennessee out in the first half, and it was a 7-0 ball game. That was the storyline to me, was just they had so many chances in the first half to really put it on Tennessee, especially the way Tennessee's offense was playing, and they couldn't do it. And I think for Alabama, you look at the last handful of weeks, basically, since SEC play began, like you said, it's just been total roller coaster. The high of Georgia, the low of Vandy, the whatever you want to call the South Carolina game, and then this one, and they just don't have a lot going for them. They're killing themselves with penalties. I think they had 15 in this game, so very, very concerning for Tide fans. And as you said earlier, you look at their schedule. They could certainly win out, but the way they're playing right now, I wouldn't bet on it. So they're going to have to improve rapidly, to stay in that playoff conversation.
Yeah, without a doubt. And let's touch on Tennessee real quick too. We don't want to just want to be a Crimson Tide show here tonight, but great win for Tennessee. Neyland was rocking. It was awesome to see that. Again, 2 out of 3 years now. You've beaten him twice in a row at Neyland. I wish I'd gotten to watch a little bit more of this game. We watched a good amount of it, but it's not to say that Tennessee are world beaters. I don't think anybody can say that Tennessee figured it out in this game. You saw Dylan Sampson run the ball well, and Nico is he's shaky too. He outplayed Jalen Milroe a little bit in this game, but it wasn't like it was overbearing and obvious that Tennessee was absolutely the better team on Saturday. So looking forward, this is what Tennessee's schedule looks like. You've got Kentucky, you got Mississippi State, Georgia coming up. That's in Sanford Stadium. And then you got Vanderbilt. Looking at that right now, I'm thinking, even as rough as it's looked the last couple of weeks with this offense, where I don't think they scored in the first quarter in any of those games, maybe not even the first half in any of those
first
games.
Half. Three consecutive first half shutouts. Arkansas, Florida, now Alabama. They've been shut out.
Now, they got Kentucky coming up next week. So,
right.
Look, Kentucky's not good either, but that's not a bad defense either. Kentucky has a good defense. So, I don't see them losing that game. Frankly, I didn't see them losing Arkansas either, though. So looking forward, though, I think Tennessee probably does get to the playoff. Two losses, you probably still have a good chance to get in the playoff in a 12-team playoff scenario with the SEC schedule. So with Georgia only left, and Georgia's starting to look better and better as we go on, I think probably they lose to Georgia, and then after that, they probably went out and make the playoff.
Yeah, I think I think your percentage chance is above 50 for that outcome based on the schedule. Now, it's been a crazy year, so Mississippi State, Kentucky, or Vandy could come up and surprise them. But my takeaway from this game on the Tennessee side was less about Nico kind of struggling. I think, look, I expected that coming into the game, right? We've seen him in SEC play. He's not playing poorly. He's just not quite figuring everything out. And we've talked about this on the SEC After Dark show, which will be coming up here at 9 o'clock Eastern, where we do our actual picks for Week 9 with the rest of the crew. But it just kind of seems like the training wheels are still on with Nico in this offense. And I don't even necessarily mean that as a negative, because what really spells that out to me, obviously, look, I'm not, film guy on Twitter, so I'm not watching the all 22 and gonna break down, Josh Heupel's scheme. But what I can tell you is they are relying heavily on the run. And contrary to popular belief, I think a lot of these, sort of high-flying offenses like a Heupel or Lane Kiffin that score a lot of points, people think they throw the ball around the yard. That's generally not the case. They do like to run the ball, these fast-paced, high-powered offenses. But it's usually, 50%, 55, 45. Tennessee, their run pass splits are not even close to 50%, right? They are leaning on Dylan Sampson, which just makes me think that Heupel knows who he has at quarterback and knows who he has at running back and with this offensive line, and he's choosing to lean on the big boys up front and Dylan Sampson. And the way his defense is playing, I don't blame him at all, right? I mean, they have one loss so far running this style in the SEC, and their one loss was a tough road environment at Arkansas, where Arkansas scored with, I don't know, a minute to go, 2 minutes, whatever it was, to take the lead. Tennessee had that game, had the lead. They just weren't able to get a stop. So, to me, I think it's about, again, what this team could look like moving forward. And at this point, I think, hey, Nico's talented enough at any point. It's possible it could click, but until he shows me that, I'm just going to assume, look, coming into a game, they're going to play smash mouth football. They're going to be physical on defense. Their front seven is great, and they're going to be physical running the football, and they're going to keep running the football all game long, just like they did against Alabama, and they're going to wear you down just like they did against Alabama in the second half. So I'm very, very impressed, with Tennessee being able to win ball games like that, because that's not what I expected from them coming into the year. So I think that's a credit to Heupel and his staff to play to their team's strengths and also, show strengths that a lot of people didn't think that they had coming into the year.
Yeah, they've absolutely adjusted well. Everybody thinks that they run the Star Wars offense, and at times they do, and they have the weapons to do it. However, they've adjusted to their personnel and how their personnel is playing this year. They almost look like a Georgia team from a couple of years ago. Now, I'm not saying they have the talent level of those Georgia teams, but they're not far off. They got a lot of talent there in Knoxville. So they're playing smash mouth football, and this is the best defense that Josh Heupel has had in Knoxville since he got there. So this Tennessee defense doesn't mess around. All right, we should move on quickly to a couple other games. Why don't we go to Mizzou Auburn real quick, just to touch on that one for a few quick minutes, and then we can keep moving on. I think we look at LSU and Arkansas at the end, as well as Georgia, Texas, and we can talk a little bit more about those games before we move into our next segments. But quickly on Mizzou Auburn, what was your takeaway there?
Not a ton, other than, is Auburn going to win another game this year? Right? I mean, I know they will. I'm sure. I don't know exactly what their schedule looks like. I'm sure they get one more patty cake.
Here you go.
Right. So, well, hey, ULM, I think is 5-1, unless they lost this weekend. I'm not keeping up with
that's not a gimme.
Warhawks, but General Booty has the Warhawks rolling, so not a gimme. But look, this game, I picked Auburn to upset Missouri, so I'm a little bit jaded because they had this game, like they've had so many other games this year, last year. The Hugh Freeze era has just been riddled with incompetence, basically. It's despite what Freeze will tell you about the cupboard being bare and this and that. I mean, the talent is not there for them to compete at an SEC championship or national title level, obviously. But the talent is there to win more than he has been winning. And this is just another example of it, where Brady Cook is in the hospital. The starting quarterback of the other team is in the hospital, and you have a lead. And credit to Brady Cook. His quote was awesome, right? I got 2.5 games left in Faro Field. I'm not missing this game, so give him credit. But point being, you knocked the starting quarterback out of your opponent for, I don't know, a half, 2 quarters, however long he was gone, and you just can't pull away. And it's just, I'm kind of at a loss for words for what's going on the Plains. We've talked about Hugh Freeze, the hot seat, in our previous shows. I don't really want to get back into that right now. But in terms of what's going on the field, it's bad. They should have won this game. Give Missouri credit. Like you said, we shouldn't spend all the time talking about losers, because Missouri fought very, very hard. Brady Cook fought hard. They won this game. They earned this game. They came back. But if you're Auburn, you just have to be sick.
You got to be. Fans are getting pretty tired of it. That's pretty obvious to see. And I know Twitter's not real life, but you can get a pulse of a fan base by watching the message board geniuses, as well as the actual message boards and on Twitter. And folks in Auburn are frustrated, and they should be. I mean, the fact that
Yep.
we're looking at another year at 0-4 in the SEC to start out with, and another year of mediocrity, and we have a worse record now 2 years in under Hugh Freeze than we do under Brian Harsin. And that's been well documented at this point, but it's not getting better. And I'll read a quick line that I wrote from our recast week. Auburn won the turnover battle, got a muff punt TD, and they still lost. So now they're just finding new ways to lose games. And that's true. I mean, you look at what they were doing earlier in the year, it was all turnovers. It was all turnover issues, all that. This game, they win the turnover battle. You get a muff punt TD. How do you lose this game? You even had a TD that was there that was in the receiver's hands, and it goes straight through your hands. I mean, I understand too that Hugh Freeze should be absolutely frustrated at this because the plays are there for the most part. If you're watching the games, like a lot of the plays are there, and it's either an interception or a drop ball. So I'm sorry, Auburn fans, it's rough right now. Congrats to Mizzou on a good win. I would talk more about them, but I think Mizzou at this point just kind of is who they are. They're 6-1 somehow, but they're not that good, frankly. I don't see it. We've been seeing this all year. I mean, here's the rest of their schedule. You got Alabama, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Mississippi State, and Arkansas. I mean, to me, a lot of those are toss-ups. The only one that really isn't to me is Mississippi State. And we talked about this all year. Mississippi State has Michael Van Buren. That kid, they found something with him. He's a solid quarterback. That kid can play. If they can protect him, give him a little bit of time in the pocket, he's a baller. So even that one may not be a gimme for Mississippi.
Yeah, I agree. I think your point's well taken about Missouri. I agree. They kind of are what they are. Speaking of Mississippi State, I think that's a good transition. We can very briefly hit on the A&M win over Mississippi State. Like you said, trying to move along so we don't want to spend too much time. And we want to save time for Georgia, Texas, obviously. But, I think takeaways from the A&M game, Michael Van Buren can play. Jeff Lebby has those guys competing, which, given how things have gone so far, given their record, is commendable. He's probably building something there. I guess we'll see, giving him some time. But they play very hard. They were jawing at A&M all game. They clearly, wanted the smoke. And from the A&M side, look, wasn't their best game. Weigman had 2 bad interceptions. He missed a couple throws downfield, just, barely off a receiver's hands. But at the end of the day, you get a road win in the SEC by 10 points. You're 4-0 in conference, 6-1 overall for the Aggies. So you pick up your thing, you pack your bags, you move on after that win, get ready for LSU. Elsewhere in the conference, I think we should also keep this one brief, but touch on South Carolina just beating Oklahoma into a pulp in Norman.
Yeah. I do want to say one thing about the A&M game, and just very briefly, I'll say that it's interesting to look in Aggieland right now, and I think Aggies are starting to realize this, is it does feel a little bit different in the Mike Elko era. A&M is winning games at both ends of the spectrum. A&M is blowing opponents out like Mizzou. A&M is winning tough games like they did against Arkansas, and they're winning games like they did against Mississippi State on Saturday, where they don't play their best game. And the defense plays well. The offense is kind of shaky. Good running game. Quarterback is not playing well. And they're still finding ways to win games. And that has not always been the case in College Station. So it'll be interesting to see if that continues, but it feels like the culture that Mike Elko is trying to instill is starting to take hold. So then on to South Carolina and Oklahoma quickly. It's hard to not talk about this game without thinking about Oklahoma and just what the hell is going on offense. And we talked a bit about it today off air and pre-show. They fired Seth Luttrell, which we can get to in a little bit in our next segment. But the offense, it doesn't even feel like that's really his fault. I wonder whose decision it was to pull Jackson Arnold. That seems like it was premature at this point. The offensive line is a complete mess. They've had injuries there. They've had injuries on the outside at wide receiver. it's almost like this one was doomed to fail from the start, especially when you look at their schedule. However, that being said, you're not supposed to lose to South Carolina 35-9 in Norman. That just is not okay. For any Sooners fan looking at this, I mean, if you looked at the pictures, the stadium was basically empty by the fourth quarter. So they're getting pretty tired of this in Norman. So I'll be interested to see kind of where this goes. But credit to South Carolina, their defense continues to be mean, and they just keep racking up wins. So credit to Shane Beamer.
Yeah, agree. I'll keep it brief, but this is the second opponent that South Carolina has blown out on the road without getting over even 300 yards on offense. In this game, very similar to the Kentucky game, they had 256 total yards of offense, and they obviously had 2 defensive touchdowns with the scoop and score and the pick 6. And I just wanted to point that out because, I have been pretty critical of South Carolina this year, especially offensively. I don't trust a lot. I just don't really trust their offense. I think rightfully so. However, Shane Beamer, the culture he has built there is showing this season where, all right, we're going to get 250 yards. Well, guess what else we're going to do? We're going to be a pain in the butt on special teams. We're going to kick you in the teeth on defense. Our front 7 is going to get after you. And it doesn't matter that we can't move the ball because we are going to be in your grill for 4 quarters. Bama saw it. I mean, those guys compete. They play hard. And if you are not ready for that, as Kentucky and Oklahoma weren't, if you're not ready to play, they will kick you in the teeth. Doesn't matter how many offensive yards that they rack up. They will find other ways to score, and they will just bury you with their defense. So Beamer deserves a ton of credit. Very, very, just cool, really, to see him get a win like that. I know, he used to coach in Norman, so I'm sure that was I don't know, bittersweet, whatever it was, homecoming for him. I know he didn't get fired there. He moved on and took another job, but good for him to go back to his old stomping grounds and absolutely obliterate the guy that they hired.
By the way, 9 sacks against an SEC team is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And I know that South Carolina fans were excited about this defensive line and the potential for it before the year, but I don't think anyone expected it to be what it's been. And it's been the best defensive line in the country through week 8. So you got Kennard over there. You've got Dylan Stewart. This defensive front should scare everybody on their schedule because they're for real.
Absolutely. Speaking of for real, LSU goes to Fayetteville. We don't need to spend a ton of time because this game wasn't really close, but I just want to give them a shout out. Obviously, I picked Arkansas to win. Fayette-Nam, I was buying into the vibes. Sam Pittman, Fayetteville at night. And LSU just came in and smacked them in the mouth. I mean, they get the win. What is it, 34-10? I mean, this game, it was a hard-fought game, but Arkansas just didn't have it, and give LSU's defense credit for giving the Arkansas offense trouble off of a bye. We thought going into it that Bobby Petrino was going to have some things cooked up, and he did not. And LSU's defense for the last few weeks is looking very good. So LSU deserves a ton of credit there. I was very, very impressed to see them after the Ole Miss game go on the road like that and just smack Arkansas in the mouth. What did you think?
Yeah, I picked Arkansas as well to win this one. I was buying in. I thought Sam Pittman, the night game in Fayetteville, they had just gotten Tennessee. They're coming off a bye week. Letdown spot for LSU. It all felt like it kind of lined up, which LSU's Twitter, if you guys haven't seen that, you should go look it up. The first thing they tweeted after the win was letdown game with a picture of Brian Kelly. So obviously they had been hearing the talk all week that this is a big letdown spot for LSU, including from us. And it wasn't. I will say about Arkansas, though, this reverted back to the mean. This was the old Arkansas. This was the Arkansas before the Tennessee game. This was the Arkansas of the last couple of years that gets the gun in their hand and then proceeds immediately to shoot themselves in the foot. 3 turnovers. Again, you're not going to win games like that, especially when you're playing an LSU team who's going to make you pay. And they did. I believe they had 10, 14 points off of turnovers. So LSU is going to make you pay. LSU is getting better as the season wears on. They're not a team that I would want to play right now. And we'll talk a little bit about the game later in the show. coming up on Saturday, which is going to be an exciting one. But we should touch on our final game. I think we're doing good on time here, so let's keep rolling.
Yeah, Georgia, Texas, in Austin, celebrities galore. Everybody's all happy and excited. All the Fairweather bandwagon Texas fans are hopping aboard. And they got punked. They got absolutely punked at home. I just loved the quote from Kirby after the game. We'll get into the officiating later, the officiating aside, because he did call them out multiple times after the game. But this is one of the reasons, I think as Georgia fans, you love Kirby, and as someone who just loves hard-nosed football guys, this makes me respect Kirby Smart so much, right? So after the game, he goes, "Our intent was not to take pictures. It was not to do all the superstar stuff. Our intent was to eat. Our intent was to come, eat, and be hungry. I'm not interested in bells and whistles." And that's what his team did from the very first whistle, especially on defense, which is Kirby's specialty. That team ate. They were hungry. They got after Quinn Ewers. Michael Williams was a beast on the edge. I mean, they got Quinn Ewers benched. They just destroyed Texas physically. You heard all year about Texas' offensive line. They are very talented. They have looked good. As we said, leading into this game, this is the first time they're playing a real team. No hate towards Oklahoma and Michigan, but as we've seen this year, those teams stink. And Texas beating them, great. They crushed both of them. Good for them. They got to play a real team in Georgia, and they got punked. Georgia just was way more physical, way faster. I mean, you even saw it early in the game. Some of those hits, even when Texas was kind of moving the ball, man, they would throw the ball into the flat. Their guy would try to make a juke, and Georgia would not just tackle them, bury them, push them back, bury them. So I was super impressed with Georgia to do that on the road against a very, very good Texas team. And I think Texas was a little shell-shocked with what they got. They're, frankly, just because of, their schedule last year and their schedule so far this year, they're used to having a talent advantage, but also just kind of doing what they want, especially on offense. Very rarely do you see a team make them that uncomfortable, and they did not know how to respond.
Yeah, that was before the game. My key. I was really interested to see.
You called the Ewers thing, yeah.
How Quinn Ewers was going to look, because everybody was look, Texas was favored by 4, I believe, in this game. Yeah. You had the entirety of College Game Day was calling the game for Texas. They all across the board. Kirby's kid, if you saw the tweet, it was showing it on the phone. Check this out. After the game.
Right, Kirby's kid.
Great.
That kid eats. He's hungry.
Oh, he was hungry. He didn't even look at McConaughey on the sidelines. He just walked right past him. He didn't care.
Not here to take pictures, son. No, stand on the sideline.
I don't know who you are. I've never seen Interstellar. I don't care. That was what it was. I mean, it came down to Quinn Ewers. He isn't what he was before the injury. At least right now, he's not playing at that level. And to Georgia's credit, their secondary answered the bell. They have not looked like that since early in the season when they were playing a bunch of cupcakes. And Clemson, they did look very good against Clemson, but other than that, their secondary has not looked that good. I mean, we talked about it. Mississippi State, Michael Van Buren puts up 31 on that defense, and really a lot of it came in the secondary. They were getting huge chunk plays off the passing game. So I was a little worried about that against Texas, but that was the matchup to me that was going to be the key to that game, and it was. And Georgia's defense answered the bell. They welcomed Texas to the SEC. Had a lot of Horn fans crying. We had the massive hair kid, looking really frustrated. He might start a podcast, by the way.
I saw he's getting some pub, which good for him. He seems like he's taking it in stride. Because
as he should. Good for him.
Yeah. That has to be a weird feeling when you're just at the game, have no clue what's going on, and all of a sudden there's millions of memes about you. So shout out to that kid for doing that. And yeah, I mean, look, again, we can spend a little more time because of the magnitude of this game, obviously, right? But what Georgia did defensively was incredibly impressive. And when you look at this, like, the offense is still not clicking. I don't know what's wrong with Carson Beck, but I mean, he throws 3 interceptions,
3 picks.
and the Georgia defense just said, whatever, no problem. We're just going to strap our cleats back on, go out there and dominate them. And they're not going to get anything. And
they were just eating, man. Eating.
Yeah, just eating. I mean, I'm looking right now. Georgia had 283 total yards. And now, obviously Texas helped them out a lot with turnovers of their own. But, sure. I mean, geez, you get 283 yards and 3 interceptions from your, at least preseason, Heisman hopeful quarterback, and you win 30-15, and it's never close. And one more thing I want to point out about, Georgia's offense, and I'll throw it back to you, is they looked bad basically all game. They took advantage of some short fields by the defense. But the one time that Texas did get it close after that crazy call, and they get the interception reversed or whatever, the penalty reversed, get the ball, score on the short field, and they have the game at 23-15, and Georgia just goes on an 11-play, 80-plus yard drive. And that, to me, is just the culture that Kirby has built, exemplified, right? Of, okay, we've been eating all game. We're playing as intense of a football game as you can possibly play. And this team is, just inched back and thinks they have a chance. And they just step on their face and go, 80 yards down the field, 11 plays. Like, when they needed to put the drive together, they did it, which, again, on the road, I think is just an extremely impressive thing to do. So we'll see if Beck can figure things out and the Georgia offense can find its footing. But I think, they can lean on Etienne, and just if that defense plays that way, they are going to be extremely difficult to beat.
Yeah, they are. Two final thoughts on that. One, that's what I was going to mention. Finally, Trevor Etienne sighting. Trevor Etienne played a great game, had some short fields to work with, which was nice. But overall, he showed up. You noticed him on the field, whereas it's been tough to notice Georgia's running game for most of the year, which hasn't been typical of Georgia teams in the past. I mean, Georgia's arguably RBU with Herschel Walker and Noshawn Moreno and all the guys that have walked through those halls, Gurley, like there's so many that you can name, Nick Chubb, like it just goes on and on. So it was good to see Georgia's running game get going in this game. And then the other piece of it is, Georgia's been maligned this year a lot in terms of this isn't up to the standard of the Kirby teams, and they look off, and the offense isn't that good, and Carson Beck is missing Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, that may be true, but at the end of the day, this team is 6-1, I believe. So we're 6-1. We've got one loss to Alabama. I would argue that this team has the exact same mentality, or even grittier than some of the Georgia teams that we've seen in the past, because they get back on the rope, they do not back down. They just keep coming at you. And we even saw that in the Alabama game. Most teams, there are only a couple programs in the country that are like this, where if they go down 28-0 in the first half, they do not fold like a lawn chair. They come right back, and they don't stop punching. They just punch, and they punch their way out of the corner. And that's what Georgia did against Alabama. They didn't end up winning the game. Bama made one more play than they did, or 2 more plays. But in all these other games, Georgia has been backed into a corner at points. Oh, Texas is coming back. Oh, they played a good first half. Texas is coming back. Boom, punch themselves out of the corner, knockout blow when they go on an 11-play, 75-yard drive or whatever it was, that you alluded to. So this team has the grit, and this team absolutely has the chance to go all the way. I don't know if there is a clear-cut favorite in college football, which makes it fun this year. But Georgia is right there in the mix for the playoff, and is absolutely for the national championship.
Yeah, they absolutely are. Moving on to sort of our just general storyline portion. We got about half an hour or so left in the show, so we'll hit on some of these we kind of already have. I was just going to say, from the Georgia-Texas game, we can hop into a little bit of officiating talk if we want to, or just dive right into the Quinn Ewers, Arch Manning, because they all stem from that game.
Well, we got one more game we got to touch on, which I think we're forgetting: Florida and Kentucky. So maybe we talk about that for a quick minute, and then we can move on. We don't have to talk too long about it, I know. But
I'm just gonna say, I don't know what Kentucky's doing. They look dead. DJ Lagway looked good. Good for Billy Napier. What does it mean moving forward? I don't know. I think Florida's better than we thought, perhaps. Not perhaps. They seem to be. They've won a few games in a row. They took Tennessee to overtime. But I don't have a ton of takeaways here. I mean, I think Florida's better off just having one quarterback, and I think we saw that. I just don't think Kentucky's very good.
No, I think we can segue into our next segment here in just a second, and I'll take it there. What is going on in Lexington? That win against Ole Miss doesn't look as good, and now we've got two pretty ugly losses. I mean, losing to Florida is one thing, but losing to Florida 48-20 when they're starting a freshman quarterback in his first start, not good. Also, shout out to I think his name's Jadon Ball, the running back for Florida, 5 touchdowns overall, over 100 yards rushing.
Yeah.
Awesome to see. Not a lot of people watching this game. A lot of people watching Georgia, Texas. There was, folks watching some of the other games, Arkansas, LSU. So not a lot of eyeballs in this game. But yeah, I kept looking up and wow, 48-20 was the final score here. So, but that leads me to the segue, which is we got a couple things we want to talk about in this segment, which includes the referees, some of the QB situations that are going on around the conference, and some potential hot seat things going on, as well as some firings. So I guess we can start there since we're talking about Kentucky, which is Mark Stoops. We just gave him an extension, and now we're sitting here where I'll pull up the schedule here. So Auburn left, Tennessee left, Texas left, Louisville. We're 3-4 overall and 1-4 in the SEC. We've lost to Vanderbilt. We've beaten Ole Miss, lost to Georgia, lost to South Carolina, got whipped by South Carolina, got whipped by Florida. You get beat by Vandy at home. Like, Waco Kid said it a couple weeks ago. He said that Mark Stoops was on the hot seat after the Ole Miss game. That was crazy. But he may not have been totally crazy, because now we're looking at it and I don't know what to say about it, but there's something up in Lexington. Maybe it's just this season. Maybe it's a dud season. It's done this sometimes during Mark Stoops' tenure. But what are you thinking on this? Is there any potential for that, or are we kind of jumping the gun?
You mentioned it right off the jump that he was just given an extension, which makes me think we're not in danger of that. But I know the fan base is restless, especially with the flirting with Texas A&M this past offseason. To me, this is a down year. Brock Vandegrift has not, turned out to be what they thought. Their offensive line is not good. They can't run the ball. It's not all on Vandegrift, but he's obviously not elevating the guys around him. I think that's kind of the game you play, as Kentucky has tried now for 4 consecutive years, 3 consecutive quarterbacks transfers, right? They had Will Levis for 2 years, transferred from Penn State, and he was the best one that they've had. Then they got Devin Leary, did not pan out last year. Brock Vandegrift has not panned out so far. So I think they're kind of just playing Russian roulette with the quarterback. Had a lot of turnover. I mean, Liam Cohen bouncing back and forth every other year. Who knows? Maybe he'll be back in Lexington next year for the, his 3rd stint or whatever. So if I just speaking to Kentucky fans, I would preach a little patience here, as Stoops has been the best coach they've ever had. But I understand the frustration, and this looks like a completely lost year when coming into it you had high hopes. So I don't think he's in real danger of losing his job this year, but he's not making any friends over there by flirting with other jobs and really having a bad year for the 2nd year in a row.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I do think that the fan base is starting to get restless. They're not real happy about the flirtation with Texas A&M. I think they're also starting to get frustrated with some things that you've talked about over the past couple of weeks, which is, for those of you who aren't Kentucky fans and aren't listening to the press conferences, some of the quotes that are coming out of the press conferences are a little bit off. Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, and it sounds like a little bit of complaining. And Mark Stoops doesn't have a whole lot to complain about. Kentucky has given him a lot of resources, and when you're complaining about NIL after a loss to Vandy and comparing it to Vanderbilt, you are out of pocket. That is not the case. Kentucky has more resources than Vanderbilt, and you need to do a better job. It's simple as that. So I don't think he's on the hot seat necessarily. They've had a couple years like this during his stint. But with the fact that there were high hopes this year and the fact that they're, now whatever we just said, they're 3-4 overall, 1-4 in the SEC. Not a whole lot of potential wins out there left on the schedule. I mean, even Louisville, absolutely they could lose to Louisville.
Totally.
So they're absolutely in the territory of potentially missing a bowl this year. I mean, this could end up being the worst year record-wise under Mark Stoops.
Right.
So now he's got that buyout money. Kentucky doesn't have the money, I don't think, to pay that buyout money, unless I'm crazy. They would buy out John Calipari, but they're not going to. They didn't do that, but they have the money.
That was a mutual parting of the ways.
Yeah, that was a transfire, is what they called it in the industry.
Arkansas, Tyson Food and Walmart came calling, and Calipari went back to the Kentucky people and said, I think I'm going to go over here. And they said, all right, go ahead.
Exactly. So, yeah, I don't think he's on the hot seat, but it's getting interesting. Keep an eye on Lexington. So let's move on there quickly, because I don't think there's too many other things to talk about in terms of coaches on the hot seat, but we can talk about one thing, which is an actual firing that happened this week with Seth Littrell. So Seth Littrell was the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma, and he was fired yesterday, I believe, after the drubbing from South Carolina. So we don't have to spend a ton of time on this, but we touched on it a little bit earlier in the show. But we've got a lot more viewers now, so maybe let's talk a little bit more about that and our thoughts on Seth Littrell and where to go from here for Oklahoma.
Bottom line to me, this just doesn't look good for Venables on any level, right? Seth Littrell won a national title at OU on the 2000 Stoops team with Heupel. He's beloved in Norman, obviously not anymore, but he was when he was hired, right? It was a celebrated hire. And we talked about this earlier off air, like you were saying in our pre-show, but this doesn't look good for Venables to me for two reasons. One, we've seen a lot of coaches, Sam Pittman is another example, who do, start their tenure at school, whatever, and their first batch of coaches works out well. And then you really get to see what kind of head coach they are, because they have enough success. In this case, Jeff Lebby goes and takes the Mississippi State job, and they have to hire another coordinator. And he totally swung and missed here with Littrell. And so that obviously doesn't look good, right? How does he do hiring assistants? Well, he just hired a terrible one, so we kind of don't know. And then, like he talked about earlier, it's also, it's kind of a scapegoat move, because I don't think this is all on Seth Littrell. I don't think he ran Dylan Gabriel off. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think Seth Littrell was the one that decided that they should go with Jackson Arnold. I think that was done at the end of last season before, he would have been brought on. So he inherited an offense that probably was not going to be nearly as good as Lebby's in terms of personnel. And then they've been ravaged with injuries. Their top 5 wide receivers on the depth chart have been out for multiple weeks. Their offensive line is beat to hell, and they're getting beat to hell every week, clearly, right, with 9 sacks against South Carolina. So they've had a ton of injuries. Their personnel is not up to Oklahoma standards. And so for me, I just look at this and say, I understand why Venables did it, but ultimately it all comes back to him, because I don't think insert coordinator X that you think is a great offensive coordinator at Oklahoma. I don't think their offense is good, and that comes back to Venables.
Yeah, I would agree there. Not too much to add. I do think that it was a scapegoat move. I don't think this is all on Seth Luttrell. This one just kind of seems like a lost year for Oklahoma. Frankly, I don't think that they've got the money to fire Brent Venables. I don't know that there's really the stomach for that yet. Anyway, I think he's probably got one more year of rope to figure out if he can get this done, especially considering he's got the extension that was just signed.
Right. Just like Stoops, another guy that was extended coming into the year. So,
yeah. So let's move on real quick. We got about 15 minutes left, so we got to start moving.
Yeah, you want to hop into next week's games? You want to touch on Ewers Arch controversy? Is there not?
Let's touch on that quickly, and then just quickly on the referee.
We can roll right into Texas Vandy. How about from this Arch Quinn topic?
Okay, let's do that. Then let's start with the refs. Then let's touch on that quickly because we've been seeing it around the country for SEC fans. It seems like every week there's 2 or 3 games that have some absolutely out of pocket, ridiculous call that changes the complexion of a game. And we saw it last week again with Georgia and with Texas, and we also saw it in the A&M Mississippi State game. So especially though in the Georgia-Texas game, you had that call overturned. There was a phantom PI. I think it was actually probably the right call to overturn it, but you can't really do that if you have a conference after the ball is spotted. And essentially what happened is the Texas fans bullied the refs into changing the call because the refs had the conference after they had a couple minutes to figure it out after the Texas fans were throwing bottles onto the field, which stopped play. And there was no penalty assessed against the Texas fans for delay of game for endangering players and fans. So it was an absolute travesty. It was crazy to watch that. Kirby Smart was going ballistic on the sidelines, as he should have been. And then you touched on it earlier. He was going nuts post game. He said it twice. 2 times did he touch on it. First of all, when he talked, I think it was Katie George on the sideline. Katie George comes over, to do the post game interview. She's talking to him. Kirby Smart immediately mentions it. He says, they tried to take this one from us with those calls. And then he goes into the post-game press conference and he goes on about it for a minute, talking about these referees and how bad they were. And it was an absolute joke of a call, but that's not an isolated incident. I mean, in the Texas A&M Mississippi State game earlier in the day, Le'Veon Moss had probably 50 yards called back for what seemed like phantom holding calls. Then you have, the previous weeks, you've got South Carolina essentially was robbed of a win against LSU on an absolutely ridiculous block in the back call on a pick 6 that basically would have sealed the game. So the refereeing in the SEC has been a joke, and it's not just the SEC. That's the other thing. It seems like this is a widespread issue across college football and even into the NFL. So I don't exactly know how you fix it. I don't have the solutions necessarily, but it is something we ought to point out because it seems like it's almost even been worse this year than it has in previous years.
Yeah, I would agree. Only thing I want to touch on here is I think you're right. I don't know exactly how to fix it. It's a really tough job. I'm not going to say I could go out there and do a better job. I absolutely couldn't. However, there are certain things, whether it's missing a call or, there's going to be judgment calls that go your way or don't go your way. But I think, things that are inexcusable is exactly what you said in the Texas-Georgia game, right? You can't call a penalty, throw the flag, announce the penalty, spot the ball for a team, and then conference after all that is done because fans are throwing stuff on the field and then reverse it. That's just simply not how it works, right? If you want to pick up a flag, you have a conference right then and there and say, actually, hey, there was no flag for pass interference, interception stands. You can't spot the ball and move on like things are normal. because of the precedent sets. But then, like you said, to not throw a flag on the Texas fans. In what world are we living in where you can just shower the field with beer and water bottles and not get penalized for it? I don't understand that at all. And we don't have to get into the whole, Texas fan thing, but that was completely ridiculous. A call doesn't go your way and you pout and start throwing bottles and stuff on the field. Get out of here with that. I hope they never do that again. I don't think they will. I'm sure the SEC and the Texas Athletic Department will handle that, but really pretty pathetic. Calls go against teams every week. As we just pointed out, South Carolina had a pick six, not just an interception, taken from them, and they did not shower the field with bottles. So you can miss me with that kind of behavior as a fan. I don't have any sympathy for it. I think it's pathetic. And then equally as pathetic that the referees went back on their call, as you pointed out, which was probably technically the right thing to do, but procedurally they completely messed it up. And then to not throw a flag on the fans for throwing stuff on the field was inexcusable.
Yeah, I'll take a different tack on that. It actually told me, we realize, okay, Texas is a great team this year. They may not be SEC ready. Georgia smashed them straight in the mouth. Them throwing water bottles on the field also told me that they're not SEC ready. If you're SEC ready, you're throwing golf balls, you're throwing mustard bottles. We're throwing Jack Daniels, airplane bottles. Texas fans, water bottles ain't going to do it. You got to get a little bit more creative, and then we can actually welcome you into the SEC, because that was some Bush League stuff, throwing water bottles. We got to get more creative with that.
Fair enough. Okay, so let's get to the next week's games. We can touch on any Quinn and Arch stuff. We'll try to keep this relatively quick. To start out, we can go right to Nashville, Texas. After getting beat by Georgia, tries to get off the mat, goes and plays Diego football, Diego Stones, Diego Pavia in his house in Nashville. What do you think about this game?
I think that congratulations on being ranked. It won't be for long. I think Texas probably has a chip on their shoulder after last week. And I do think Diego football keeps it close for a little bit, maybe for the first quarter and a half. But I think Texas does eventually pull away. Obviously, Quinn Ewers is going to be the starter. My question really here is, what is his confidence like? That could be the X factor for Vanderbilt. Is Quinn Ewers mentally shot right now? Because that was a total panic move from Steve Sarkisian during that game. And look, I watched the whole game. Hammer was with me. We watched the whole game. Even as bad as Quinn Ewers was playing, putting Arch Manning in that spot against the Georgia defense that is playing like that, an underclassman, when you've got an upperclassman starting quarterback who is the guy that you have said many times is the absolute leader of this team, and that everyone looks to him as the leader, you pull the leader during that time when the going gets tough and when you were down on the mat. I did not like that move at all. It seemed like a total panic move to me. So I'm really interested to see what Quinn Ewers' mental state is for this game. That might be Vandy's only hope. If Quinn Ewers is turned up and torqued on, I think that Texas wins big.
I think you're spot on in terms of the Ewers confidence thing, because if I'm putting myself in his shoes, as you said, this is my third year starting for this program. Publicly, my coach, Sark, has had nothing but my back, right? I actually think, until this moment, frankly, I think Sark has handled this situation extremely well, the way he's handled Ewers and Arch. But yeah, to do that in that spot in the biggest game of that, of the season, not his career. He obviously, played in the playoff game last year, but the biggest game of the season by a mile, to bench him when he's not blocking, right? He's not the one letting all these guys in his face. He's not the one that's, calling the plays that aren't working, right? So Sark's a great play caller. I'm not saying he, messed up calling plays. I'm just saying there's a lot of things going on in that game that are not Quinn Ewer's fault. He also shoulders a lot of the blame. He did not play well, clearly. He would tell you that. But, yeah, I agreed. I thought to bench him was kind of a panic move, and I don't really know what that does to his confidence. He did come back in the game in the second half and look better, but I don't know how you can't be looking over your shoulder now, more so than he already was, and just think this game's a perfect example. Man, if I come out here and, we're, I don't know, losing 7-3 after the first quarter against Vandy, which is very possible, am I about to get benched again? Because, he benched me in the biggest game. And by the way, Arch came out there, and other than he was able to run around a little bit, also looked terrible, fumbled. I mean, it was a disaster like we, anybody could have predicted. In terms of this game, I think you're right. I think Texas probably will bounce back here, but I don't know. I mean, Vandy's offense gives people trouble. Diego Pavia, I think this game will be a dogfight. And I'm very interested to see how, Texas handles that mentally, because their first real mental test of the season where they got down and they saw, a team that could match up with them. I don't think they handled that very well. They looked a little shell-shocked. That picture of Quinn and Arch sitting on the bench was kind of perfect, where both of them look like, Sam Darnold seeing ghosts, and they're just sitting next to each other like, what the hell is going on right now? Because we're getting our tails whipped right now, and, nothing's working. So, if Vandy can jump on them early, things could get real dicey for the Longhorns.
Definitely. All right, where do you want to go next? We're going to go overtime again here, but that's all right.
Well,
baby,
we'll go over a little bit. I do want to just knock out a few games really quick. Oklahoma at Ole Miss. Anything to say there? The only thing I want to say here is, Oklahoma has no chance, first of all. But are they even going to make a bowl? Here's their schedule: Ole Miss, Maine, Missouri, Alabama, LSU.
you need 2 wins to get there. So you got to get one, maybe
you got
Missouri.
One in Maine. Yeah, you got to beat Ole Miss, Missouri, Bama, or LSU.
Man, look, I'm not saying they can't beat Ole Miss, but it's a long shot. I haven't looked at ESPN's predictor, but 10% maybe. They don't have an offense. Ole Miss's defense isn't that bad. Ole Miss has a lot more weapons. I kind of see it as like a 27-6 game or something like that. But yeah, not a whole lot to say on this one. I do think Ole Miss gets the win. Maybe they lose. Watch SEC After Dark for my pick, but not a whole lot to say on that one.
Yeah, agreed. We'll stay in the state of Mississippi for another quick one. Mississippi State hosting Arkansas. This could get a little dicey. Arkansas coming off of a pretty tough home loss, going on the road, cowbells. Van Buren's looking pretty good. What are the odds we see an upset in Starkville?
Not high, but not zero. We've been talking about it after watching them for the last couple of weeks. They have found something with Michael Van Buren. That kid can play. I can't believe that he ended up going to Mississippi State. Now, fans in Starkville may know more than I do about how they got that kid to go there, but he was a 4-star out of DC. So how the heck is he in Starkville right now?
Great work. Levy's well respected.
By Jeff Lebby. Exactly. Great work by Jeff Lebby. And he's somebody that you can build a program around. And kids are going to want to come play for him. So they have something with Michael Van Buren. So I'm not counting them out in this game. I think Arkansas is a good team if they stop shooting themselves in the foot. But I'm not willing to put Mississippi State to rest in this game. I think it's going to be a fascinating game. I'm really interested to watch this one, actually, which is crazy to say considering Mississippi State has won 2 games or won 1 game. One game. So, but yeah, I love watching Michael Van Buren. He's fun to watch, and I'm interested to see how Arkansas bounces back.
Yeah, only thing I will say on this game is I think it could get a little testy. It's only a 7-point spread, so an upset is certainly not out of the possibility. And I think, like you said, in terms of shooting themselves in the foot, if Arkansas plays basically the game that A&M played last week, I think they probably lose.
Yeah.
So they have to take care of the ball. They have to just stop the chunk plays. Mississippi State had some chunk runs early against A&M on those early drives in the first half. So very, very interesting spot for Sam Pittman in Arkansas. The Razorbacks would not be happy if they were to drop that game. So we'll keep a close eye on that one. Moving on, before we get into the two marquee matchups, again, very quickly, Auburn goes to Kentucky. I dubbed this the dumpster fire bowl in our run sheet for the show. Any thoughts here? I don't know if I can watch this game. I don't know if I can put myself through that. So
It's probably going to be like watching paint dry. It actually might be worse than watching that because both of these teams are really down right now. I guess the intrigue is like which one of these teams fights their way out of the foxhole. This one feels like that scene from The Dark Knight where the Joker walks into all the gangsters and he takes the pool stick and he breaks it over his leg and he gives it to both of them and says, "One of you comes out alive." Because
yeah.
who's coming out of this one alive? Like it's these teams are both terrible right now, and one of them, whoever loses this game, the fan base is going to be furious. If you're Kentucky, everyone's been talking about how terrible Auburn is. You cannot lose to Auburn. If you're Auburn, you're looking across the way and seeing these losses Kentucky has, and you're like, we can beat these dudes. We had Missouri. We had them in their place last week. We can beat these guys. And if we don't, they're just going to lose their mind even more about Hugh Freeze. So it's a fascinating matchup in that sense. But in terms of can I watch this game? Honestly, no.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I don't think I can bring myself to sit down and watch much of this because it's going to be rough. So moving on to games that I can sit down and watch and be excited about. Before we get to the nightcap, LSU at A&M, let's touch on Missouri at Alabama. Number 21 Missouri facing off against number 15 Alabama, which is crazy to say. Alabama at the moment favored 13.5. What are your thoughts on this one? Can Alabama get right? What do you think?
If there's a team to get right against, it's Missouri. Missouri is ranked number 21 right now, but as we touched on earlier in the show, they kind of are who they are at this point. I don't think they're really that good. Is Alabama really that good? I don't know. I don't think they are at this point. And there's a lot of problems that the Alabama defense is playing pretty well, but the Alabama offense cannot figure it out. And this Missouri defense is not very good. Texas A&M scored 41 against these guys. Now, and I don't think Texas A&M's offense is like world beaters. I mean, we've seen them most of the year. They're okay, So I think Alabama probably can get right in this game. I don't like the 13.5 spread at all. I think that is way too much for Alabama right now. And as we've seen in these earlier games this year in the SEC, those big spreads very often are getting covered by that team who's the underdog. So it's going to be an interesting game. To be honest with you, it's going to be tough for me to watch. I'm going to watch it because it's Alabama. I'm going to watch it because it's Missouri. It's a ranked game. But it's probably not going to be very fun football to watch, frankly, even like the Tennessee-Alabama game was last week.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. We've got to our faithful viewers, Rick and Bonnie. Thanks for watching as always. Rick, a big Alabama fan. He's got some things to say. Bama's in a funk. We stink. And he's kind of right. When I think about this game, exactly what you said, I think, man, that's a big spread. Bama is just not really a team I feel like I can trust to cover that right now. You alluded to it as well. I'm not that high on Missouri, but I know Missouri is going to fight. They do have weapons, Luther Burden, Theo Weiss, Mookie Cooper in this game. Could find some space, could make things interesting, could hit some chunk plays. So, in terms of what's going to happen in this game, I kind of have no idea. I could see Alabama clicking and blowing them out, or I could see this being a 4-quarter dogfight. I think that's kind of what I'm most interested in, is Kalen DeBoer's first year. Bama has lost 2 games in the regular season, I think since the first time since 2007, Saban's first year in the regular season, right? They, lost some playoff or SEC title games. But first time since 2007, they've had 2 losses in the regular season. So really just fascinated to see what DeBoer brings, what his team brings this Saturday. Are they ready? Do they get off the mat? Do they still look locked in? Or do they look kind of like checked out and kind of like, this ain't what I signed up for when I came to Bama. And the guy that I did sign up to play for ain't here anymore. And this guy ain't it, So very, very interesting. Things could go south if this game does not go Alabama's way.
Definitely could.
All right. Last game that we need to touch on here before we close things up. Number 8 LSU at number 14 Texas A&M. Night game in Kyle Field. A&M last I saw favored by 2.5. Massive game, right? A&M right now atop the SEC standings at 4-0, while LSU is either 4-0 as well or 3-0. So both unbeaten. LSU 3-0, A&M 4-0. Respectively, both have difficult roads moving forward. Here's a look at LSU after this weekend. Here's a look at A&M after this weekend. But going into November, unbeaten in the SEC for either one of these programs would be a massive jump forwards, and they would be in the driver's seat to get to Atlanta, whoever wins this. So really cannot overstate the magnitude of this matchup enough. What do you think are the big things you're watching coming into this matchup?
There's so many keys and interesting things going on in this game. First time that this game hasn't been played at the end of the year, I believe, since A&M joined the conference, or maybe it's been played a couple different times. But for the most part, since Texas A&M joined the SEC, this game has been played as the Thanksgiving weekend game during rivalry week. And we've seen some crazy things happen. If anybody remembers, which I'm sure you do, the 74-72 game, you've seen freshman Connor Weigman come in as the third-string quarterback and beat LSU. You've seen Joe Burrow come in to A&M and rock them 50-7. There's just been a lot of crazy things happen in this rivalry. So it being a night game in Kyle Field, the atmosphere is going to be incredible. It's going to be nuts. It's going to be loud. One of the best college football atmospheres you're going to see. Going to be a night game on ABC, I believe. So I hate to keep using this, but to me, a big key in this game for A&M especially, and for LSU, is Connor Weigman versus the secondary. LSU's secondary has been pretty bad up until the last couple weeks, and they've started to figure things out. It seems like getting pressure on the quarterback is helping their back end a little bit to be able to cover a little bit better. But Connor Weigman is kind of Jekyll and Hyde right now. We do not know which Connor Weigman that we're going to get from week to week. He didn't look good against Notre Dame. Then he goes down with injury. He comes back from injury. He looks great against Missouri. A couple shaky throws. He gets bailed out on. No turnovers in that game. The team scores 41 points. Last week against Mississippi State, he throws 2 interceptions that are really bad. Not good throws at all. So can LSU slow down Connor Weigman, and is Connor Weigman on his A game or is he on his F game? And I think that's a huge key matchup in this game. And the other one that I'm watching is the Texas A&M defensive line against the LSU offensive line. This Texas A&M defensive line is really, really good. So are they able to get to Garrett Nussmeier? Are they able to get him off schedule? And what are they able to do against this LSU run game, which has started to find a little bit of legs in the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, you nailed it there. Look, Weigman, Jekyll and Hyde. If A&M is going to win this game, he needs to be good. Obviously what he did against Notre Dame was pitiful. The way he looked last week against Mississippi State was not very good. I don't think that effort will beat LSU even at home. So we need to see him look more like he did against Missouri if the Aggies are going to pull this one out. And then I think you nailed it on the other side because A&M's defense, especially their defensive line, is for real. They get a ton of pressure on the quarterback, not just from their D-line, but from the front seven because Elko, he always has been, but he is a master at disguising blitzes and basically getting free rushers. I mean, you watch an A&M game, whether it was when he was the DC or now, that guy gets a free rusher multiple times a game typically because he just fools the O-line about who's coming and where they're coming from. But the LSU offensive line is very good. And Nussmeier also, he's not a runner, but he is very slick in the pocket. He hasn't been sacked the last 2 weeks. And Ole Miss and Arkansas can also get after the quarterback. So really big challenge for the Aggie D-line and front seven to get home because Nussmeier and his weapons, if given time, that he will find space against the A&M secondary. I think A&M secondary is pretty good, but they are also in a game like this. I think they're vulnerable. I don't think you can just expect them to cover, for 4 and 5 seconds downfield. So A&M has to get pressure on Nussmeier and get home. Aside from Weigman on the offensive side, I do think A&M will be able to run the ball. That's kind of what I'm interested in. Because like you said, look, I think if Weigman plays, up to his ceiling, or let's say just plays like Missouri, or even, the game he played against LSU 2 years ago when he was a freshman and they beat a top 10 LSU team at home. If he plays that way, there will be yards to be had down the field in the passing game. I'm interested if LSU's defense, like you said, if the last few weeks are what they are now, or more of, just whatever, good game plan. They played hard. It great weeks. Can they keep it up consistently? Because A&M runs the dang football. And if they can run the ball in this game, that'll keep Nussmeier off the field. That will open up the passing game for Weigman. The Aggies are second right now in the SEC running the football behind Tennessee at 218 yards a game. So, Whit Weeks, the LSU front seven, can they force Weigman to beat them? And I really don't know what to think. I don't know if they can or not, because 3 weeks ago I said, no way. I said A&M's going to run or A&M's going to pass. Like, they'll be fine. But the last few weeks we've seen things from LSU's defense that we haven't seen until the Ole Miss and then Arkansas games. So really, really interested to see how the LSU defense holds up, what Connor Weigman looks like, and then what the Aggie front seven can do on Nuss, because he's a good quarterback and he's a freaking gamer, man. I mean, you saw in the Ole Miss game, he didn't take a sack. He took a lot of hits and he kept just chucking the ball downfield. And when the game was on the line, you could just see it in his face. You kind of knew, like, this guy's going to deliver the ball where it needs to be. And you better hope that the guy drops it or your, defender can get there in time. But A&M will have their hands full with him.
Yeah, he's got a lot of mettle, a lot of moxie. So get on the Nuss bus, baby. He's
right.
moving. It's gonna be a really interesting game. The fact that it's in Kyle Field, I think, matters.
It does. Okay, well, I think we've gone over enough. We've got 2 more segments we'll knock out real quick. We have our Muschamp Coach of the Week. If you are a new viewer, we give this award out every week because we love and respect Will Muschamp on this podcast. His intensity, spit flying out of his mouth, yelling at refs, players, punching whiteboards. So we just like to honor him and give a shout out to a coach who, maybe jumped out of line, was just very intense on the sideline, things of that nature. So, Alex, you want to award the Muschamp Coach of the Week last week?
Yeah, so this week we went a little bit off the beaten path. But we awarded it to, if anyone watched the early fun football, I believe it was on Thursday night last week. It was, or maybe Friday night, actually.
Friday night.
Friday night football, Florida State versus Duke. And we had a coach actually in the stands. So here you can see it. Here's the Muschamp Coach of the Week. This is a Florida State fan who is in the fans with a Waffle House menu and an Xbox headset, losing his mind at fans behind him because they need to get their head out of their butt because we're losing to Duke right now, and you guys need to figure it out. So,
also, no shirt.
no shirt. He's wearing khakis. He's got the dad bod going, which is the coach look to a T. He obviously has been utilizing that Waffle House menu. He probably knows it like the back of his hand. So respect to that guy. Absolutely the Muschamp Coach of the Week. There was another couple of potential candidates. Kirby Smart, obviously, for his frustration on the sideline after that call. But I don't know how you get through this week and don't give it to that guy from Florida State.
I agree. So shout out to that guy, Florida State fan, coach, perhaps next coach at FSU. You never know, right? Dress for the job you want, not the job you have. So shout out to that guy. If any of our viewers know that guy, please get us in touch with him because he's a legend. And last but not least, our biscuit of the week. So we're Biscuits and SEC. We love biscuits. We love food. And each week we're just going to try to feature a biscuit, whether it's our own, something you guys send us. On that note, please send us if you're out there eating biscuits, whether it's Pillsbury from the little tube that you crack open or you're at a restaurant or whatever. Y'all send us those biscuit pics, and you can just DM us on any of the socials. Shoot us an email, contact@biscuitsandsec.com. But for this week, Bossman and I, we're back at our parents', so we hopped in the kitchen. You want to let them know what we did here?
Yeah, so Hammer crushed it. We were trying to figure out what we were going to do, whether we were going to go to a little biscuit spot down the road or if we were going to make them at home, and realized we had the ingredients to make some 3-ingredient drop biscuits. So credit to Hammer
scratch, baby.
From scratch. Yeah, the old-fashioned way. So credit to Hammer on these. They were fantastic. We had some sausage with them, some eggs, some slap you mama on the eggs, and it was awesome. Great way to get Saturday started, a great way to get excited for college football. So great work to Hammer on those biscuits. And if you guys want to send us one, send it to us at Biscuits and SEC on all of the social channels. You can just DM us a picture, and we'd love to feature your biscuit from anywhere across the SEC footprint.
Awesome. Well, we've already gone over time enough. I guess that's just going to become a weekly tradition, which is fine by me if we're just talking ball. So we're peaking at viewership right now. So everybody must have loved the end of the show, the Muschamp Coach of the Week, the biscuit of the week. So thank you to everybody who tuned in tonight. Just as a reminder, we're about to go live in about 12 minutes with our SEC After Dark crew to make all of our actual picks for Week 9. We go live with them every Wednesday night, 9 o'clock Eastern on SEC After Dark. Our show, Biscuits and SEC Live, is every Wednesday at 7:30 Eastern. So we hope you all will join us moving forward. Drop us a line on social, email, anything. If you have any ideas, sign up for our newsletter below if you want to stay tuned on what we have going on, our thoughts on the SEC. And just appreciate you all tuning in.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week. Make sure to subscribe.